All right, welcome into One Bills Live. Maddie Glab, Steve Tasker, joined by Andrew Catalon and Cynthia Frelund. As promised, these two are going to be part of the preseason broadcast tomorrow afternoon as the Buffalo Bills take on the Indianapolis Colts at 4 o'clock. Andrew's entering his 7th season as the Bills preseason TV play-by-play man, and Cynthia Frelund is entering her second year as a preseason reporter for the Bills on the sidelines.
Cynthia, it used to be my claim to fame used to be, football player, all-pro, all that. Now my claim to fame is that I was the analyst for Andrew Catalon's first NFL game ever.
Whoa.
It was like 10 years ago.
You're still a former football player.
Yeah.
You could still say
But
that.
that's not my claim to fame anymore. Now I'm famous for having worked with you for all those years.
So you guys are in here a day before the game. You've gotten to have your production meeting, gotten to sit down with Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane. Steve told us a little bit about what he heard or what he took away from the conversation. So, Andrew, I'll start with you first. As you begin to study this team, you begin to hear from Sean and Brandon, see things that have come out of training camp. What's one thing that's sticking out in your mind here as we're a day away from the first preseason game?
Well, I like what they said in our meeting today, if we just start with the meeting, in the sense that guys could have had really good practices so far in training camp, but how does that translate when the lights come on, when they're on the field against another team? And conversely, somebody who may have struggled so far this summer, do they flip a switch when the lights come on? So I think that was an interesting take that both Brandon and Sean made. And I think tomorrow, for me, I want to see these young cornerbacks play. I think that's obviously been a big storyline throughout camp. And now how they do against the Colts is something I'm looking out for.
And Cynthia, how about for you? Your analytics, you've seen this team at practice. You were in Rochester a couple days ago, so you're a part of the NFL Network broadcast that day. What's something that's at the top of your mind here as the Bills are going to host the Indianapolis Colts tomorrow?
I'm kind of excited because I think the storyline going out of last season was that, with Tre'Davious White not being there, and then, of course, the kind of ending of the game that we all, 13 seconds, whatever, we need to get into that. But without Tre'Davious White there, how those defensive backs play. And also, Leslie Frazier has been so masterful using more than 4 defensive backs, he kind of set the trend. He started doing it far more often than other teams did, earlier than other teams do. Now you see all of these teams copycatting that. So I like this, especially, I'm just going to put a button on what you said, because we get to see Matt Ryan. It's not like he's going to be playing against their backup quarterback or a lot of non-starters. This is against their one. So this could be something, especially in the AFC, which is a gauntlet of quarterbacks, top quarterbacks. Look at the number of great quarterbacks in the AFC just in general, and then look at the number of great quarterbacks that the Bills have to face. Yeah, we're going to need the defensive backs to really help out, especially that the front has already been good. So let's add now to the back. So I'm excited for that.
You mentioned it too, and I'll put this to you because you're the analytics person. The Bills, we talked to Leslie Frazier in the preseason, in the training camp, and I said, we had him on the show, and I said, you guys play 5 DBs constantly. I go, what do teams do, or do they try to pry you out of that personnel combination because they want to get a matchup, and the only matchup you give them is what they get. And he goes, yeah, they try it, and we get a lot of feedback from guys like, why do you play it again? And sometimes it is a tough matchup for the Bills, let alone but they stick with it. What do you sense in that trend of 5 DBs matching 3 wideouts, obviously, but the trend in the league about personnel usage, particularly defensively?
Well, starting off really, really macro, we're seeing a lot more, just the volume of passes in the league is just gone up. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, if you look at college, where some of these younger players, they're coming from, right? They don't see and diagnose 2 safety shells in college very well at all. They can't pick up zone on pass easily at all. So that's why you're starting to see motion with running backs to try to tip off which defensive players are assigned what. But in general, that kind of the chess game of the offenses versus defenses, you have to kind of take what's coming out of college. You can hear it with you see it with the Joe Burrows, you see it with the Patrick Mahomes, you see it with the Josh Allens. Those 2 safety shells, you can see the splits in their data. It's harder for them. But the caveat there, and this is a big one, you have to have 2 good safeties to be able to do that. So it can't just throw it out with anyone.
So you're saying if a team can't play those double safeties with these quarterbacks because they're too vulnerable.
Yeah, or if the quarterbacks They can't pre-snap. They understand man coverages coming out of college because it's just like you and I. The more reps we take together, the better our broadcast is.
Right.
In college, they play a lot of man, and the man on man, and they've seen it, so they know what those looks are. But confusing them a bit with zones, especially tricky zones, and especially how Leslie Frazier keeps evolving linebacker play and then the safety play. Like, where is this guy lining up? Whose assignment is who? So those types of things, as long as you stay ahead of it, it's a big advantage for the defense.
Right.
Cynthia, you talked about the chess pieces that go into this game. Andrew, when you look at the roster that the Buffalo Bills have and guys that you think are going to play some snaps here tomorrow afternoon, who are some chess pieces that you're looking forward to seeing out on the field?
I think that you look at that rookie draft class, there's so many guys you can go up and down and make a case you want to see all of them play. Certainly Benford at corner, I'm excited to see him. You've heard so much about him, and you've seen him make plays throughout the summer. I think the punter competition is something that might get sorted out, has to get sorted out in this preseason. So you'll see, Matt Araiza not only punting, but holding is a big part of this, as we all know. So I think that the draft class, and we spoke about this morning in our meeting, Steve brought it up, on paper has a chance to be fantastic, but now you want to see those guys in a game situation, and that's what we'll get tomorrow.
Yeah,
Cynthia, is there anybody at the top of your list that
James Cook, your girl loves fantasy football. Come on. I need to be able to go back to the NFL Network and tell everyone where exactly they should be drafting James Cook, because this pass catching back has so much potential. And the way he looked in practice on Monday when we saw, I love the hands drills, and they were having a little bit of fun, maybe messing around a little bit on the sideline. They seem to be having a good time. There's something special in the air here, and I think that could be a really interesting one to watch.
Right. Give us about this game in particular, playing the Colts. Matt Ryan, this is the first time, in the big picture, people around the country going, all right, Matt Ryan is not wearing the Falcons uniform. Let's see what he looks like. And this is a Colt team that could not have been more disappointed at the end of the year. I mean, we were talking here in Buffalo, the one team we don't want to face in the playoffs is Indianapolis, right? And then they didn't even make it. They got beat by the Bills got beat by Jacksonville as well. But to win and in against the worst team in the league and lose, they've got to be bitter. But now they got Matt. How's this going to play out with Matt Ryan in Indianapolis? They're a good football team. And is Matt Ryan going to be the missing piece? And we're going to get a chance to find out tomorrow, right?
Yeah, so the biggest piece for me that the Colts provide any quarterback that's standing behind that O-line with that running back in this position in his career. So Jonathan Taylor just coming off being the rushing leader, and also doesn't look like he has, knock on wood, a lot of tread on the tires. I know he did coming out of Wisconsin, but he's still young in the league. So with those two things, you know what can happen? Play action passing. And you know what happens when Matt Ryan has a good play action pass game going? They end up in the Super Bowl. Now we won't talk about how he was an MVP. We won't talk about how that Super Bowl ended, because probably not how he wants to remember it. But ultimately, they were up on the Patriots till a little while. But ultimately, the play action pass is going to be so key. They do have some question marks in terms of who's going to catch those passes. But Michael Pittman has allegedly stepped up. We don't know yet. We'll see tomorrow, I bet. And then, Alec Pierce, who's their rookie that they drafted. I think that will be an interesting too. It's a little Cincinnati Bearcat action there. So it'll be good to see. And Paris Campbell is fast. If nothing else, he is speedy.
The Bills' defense was really good against play-action passes last year in terms of quarterback rating, passer rating. So we'll see what that looks like if they decide to go into that play-action here on Saturday. Now, Andrew, what question marks do the Indianapolis Colts need to answer here in the preseason so fans, so coaches, so the scouting department feels better heading into Week 1?
Yeah, I've always been really high on the Colts since Frank Reich took over. I, like Steve said, am shocked that they lost that last game of the season. I mean, you saw them on Hard Knocks mid-season last year, just the culture that Frank has put in place. I think he's done a tremendous job. They have great pieces. Now they have a new quarterback again. I mean, that's been the thing. They have a new quarterback every year. And I'm not surprised. I think it's smart they're playing their ones tomorrow. I mean, you got to get out and just kind of run through some things. So I think that Matt Ryan will love, if he doesn't already, love Frank Reich. I mean, if you're a quarterback, you'd want to play for Frank Reich. But as Cynthia pointed out, who's going to catch the ball? I'm big on Pittman, 1,000 yards last year. But, there's a lot of new pieces now they have to kind of put together, and I think it starts for them tomorrow.
Give us an idea about your thoughts. coming out. The Bills with such high expectations, the highest in years and years. Well, that's not true. They had high expectations last year. It was just regional. It wasn't national. Now it's national. The Bills come in with...
It was more than regional.
Last year?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It was, it was more than regional.
Right. Yeah. So they are. But they're... And Sean McDermott alluded to that. They said, what are you going to do with these expectations? He says, and this is where we live now. And he's right. You come into a preseason like this, way different than they were 5 years ago when they took over. How do you think the philosophy of Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane has changed, or how would you change it from then to now?
I mean, the biggest change, obviously, this year, it's going to be what's going on with the offensive coordinator. You know, you lose a guy like Brian Daboll, who has been really the counterpart to Josh Allen as Josh Allen has been growing. But I actually think it's the perfect time to make the switch, because now you have Josh Allen's already leading. He's, the most combined, rushing and passing yards. He's really already starting to get some like historical numbers going, and he's just a baby in the league in terms of how long he's been here. But ultimately, it's the time. He doesn't need Brian Daboll to teach him anymore. Now it can be more of a collaborative effect. So now it's like, what do you like to do? How do you want the slot to evolve? That's the space where you were asking a lot of questions today. How do you want the run game to support what we're trying to execute here? He's the first quarterback in NFL history with at least 6 rushing touchdowns in each of his first 4 seasons. So this is like he's got these numbers, right? So ultimately now you can grow. He doesn't need the newbie stuff anymore.
Right. I'd say this too, Steve, and you know this, but I think Sean McDermott is in a great situation in the sense that your teams went to the Super Bowl year after year, and it seems to me that Sean taps into that. He'll go to a Jim Kelly. I remember last year when I did a game here with CBS and James Lofton, he asked James, how did Marv keep you guys going to get back year after year? I really feel that Sean is so curious, and he's got the right people around, like you, to say, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I think that works to his advantage and this team's advantage this year.
Interesting, too, and we'll talk about this on the broadcast tomorrow. You said something interesting in our production meeting about when to play, because now this is new territory, and Sean McDermott alluded to it, 3 preseason games instead of 4. And, back in the Stone Age, it was 6, right? So it's less and less games, and strategically you want to play your guys to get them ready, the ones, balancing the injury thing, of course, but also, I mean, even if you knew they weren't going to get hurt, I don't think you still play them 4 quarters in a preseason game, even if you knew they were invincible. You had a nice observation, an interesting point about how to choose when you play your ones.
I do think it's kind of to answer the specific question that you would like to know about your ones or your depth chart. So as you see some of these, Frank Reich is playing Matt Ryan. That is his starter. There's no bones about it. There's no quarterback battle there.
And they're also going against the number 1 defense from a year ago.
They're going through it's the number 2s of the number 1 defense. Right. So, but they have picked strategically. I think they should pick strategically when they kind of give their reps and to whom, because as you're seeing, there's always, not only is it just getting your ones the right sort of reps, so it's smart and I get to say we because I work for the Bills for the next 2 weeks. We get to see the Bills go against, the young guys are going against Matt Ryan. That's wonderful for the development of which defensive backs to pick, and even the front with the rotation and who's going to be around there. So that's cool. But some of these other teams, it doesn't make sense to, for example, it was smart of Josh McDaniel not to play against the Jags his ones with the Hall of Fame game. Mm-hmm. Right. That made a lot of sense. Why would you put them out there? Same thing for the Jags. Why would you put? You don't need that. The Raiders had the number 1 pressure front last season. You don't need. You know what? Let's get Trevor Lawrence like some upright reps next year, as opposed to just starting with being on his back.
So you say pick your opponent.
Pick your opponent so that you answer the question that you'd like to know about your team. Don't worry about. It's the 3rd game. We get to play 1 half. Otherwise, we're not the starter.
That's what you're getting.
Right. Things have evolved, too. Like, Steve, you said you used to play 6 preseason games. Now you can do these controlled scrimmages.
Sure.
And that is putting in good work, and you're going through the mechanics of your offense and defense. I think things have really changed.
One of the things, too, that Sean McDermott said in our production meeting was the coaching staff is new, particularly on the offensive side of the ball for the Bills. New voices, new collaboration, and he has spent the entire training camp for the last 3 weeks being the lead official. Like, he has to blow the play dead. He has to be the one to protect the quarterback. He has to be the one to call the player. He has to spot the ball, says, I want 3rd and 10 here. Now, he gets to be an actual head coach on the sidelines. That's kind of a big deal given that one side of his football team, the offensive side, has a lot of new moving parts.
Have you seen, so obviously week 1 is against the Rams. You see, like, Sean McVay has a guy that, like,
Yes.
The get-back coach?
Yes, the get-back coach.
Like, and I think
Yes.
that's going to be funny. I wonder if Sean McDermott needs a get-back coach just for the one game to like get back into his normal groove.
Yeah, it was interesting. He said Ken Dorsey is going to sit upstairs. And
I think I need to know more about Ken Dorsey. I think I need to like hang out with him more.
Right?
He sounds fun. He sounds really fun.
The story goes that he's a little bit of
fiery.
an official abuser.
Yeah.
He yells at officials. So he's up in prominence. He's got to be the guy standing there they're putting him upstairs because they don't want a penalty. And they don't want him to get fined maybe, right? So
he sounds fun.
Right.
For
He
real.
sounds
I
like
wanna
a man after my own heart because there may not be. I'm definitely in the all-time top 10 for the worst possible player at abusing officials.
Josh Allen said he never lets me forget his college record. Josh will be like, "What was it, Ken? 36 and 4, 30, 32 and 8."
Right.
And Ken's always like 38 and 2. That
38
was my record in college at Miami. Andrew, when it comes to preparing for a game like this for preseason games, it's not a 53-man roster on each side of the ball. It is 53 plus 40 on each team, basically. So when you're making your chart, when you're deciding, okay, here's the storylines we want to talk about, here's everything I need to know about these almost 100-man rosters, what is the difference here from preseason to regular season in the volume that you have to prepare for?
I have a giant poster board that like wouldn't even be good for a 10-year-old class project because it's too big for them.
Right.
Look, it's different than a regular season game because I'm wearing a Bills shirt with a Bills microphone, and this broadcast is for the Bills, right? Even though it's on NFL Network tomorrow, if you're a Colts fan in California, you're probably not going to like the broadcast you're going to hear
Sorry.
because we're all about the
Sorry,
Bills
not sorry.
on this broadcast.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, and they have their own announcers
And
for Indianapolis, and that's the difference between the
It's
regular
one of the
listed
few
are.
times, and it's one of the few times you can be and I said this before, you can be an unapologetic homer. It's all Bills all the time, and you'll get a name and number of a guy from the Colts who tackled a player, and then we're moving on back to the other side of the field. So that's different. That's very
Speaking of
different.
being an unapologetic homer, from each of you guys maybe, is there a player that you've studied, that you've watched, that maybe won't see the field a lot in this first preseason game, but somebody that you're really excited about, whether it's his story or whether it's what he did in training camp? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Well, I mentioned Benford earlier, and at our production meeting today, I asked Brandon Bean how they went about finding him. Obviously a smaller school at Villanova. How do you get to know a guy like that? He shared the whole backstory of that, which we'll definitely tell on the broadcast tomorrow. But it's those types of things when you talk about the difference between a regular season and a preseason game. You also have more time to dive into these stories because people want to hear more about these guys they might not know about. And I'm excited to do that as well.
Cynthia, who's the player for you?
Well, I'm kind of like, I really want to know what's going to happen in the slot for this team. I think it's a really important part of the roster that they paid a lot of attention to, bringing in Jamison Crowder, of course, and then Khalil Shakir. You got to draft the right people and put them in the right. And then, of course, I've been hearing all these great things about the camp that Isaiah McKenzie's been having, and he just got such a great personality. And I don't know if nationally people know like that he's just like full of joy and fun and like happiness. And so I'm really happy to kind of figure out. We'll probably see more of that in a different game. I don't know if this will be the game where we really see a ton of that, but those are some people who I have my eye on in terms of how interesting is this going to get. This, I don't know. I have like a love affair with the slot there because that's when you first saw
It's
Josh
an
Allen
important
get
position
good.
for Josh
Totally.
Allen. He loves that security blanket, that dump off
Exactly.
target.
One of the other things, too, one of the guys I'm looking at is Christian Benford, and you think down the big picture, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but Tremaine Edmonds is in the last year of his contract. He plays a position that has been undervalued.
Terrell?
Terrell, yes. No.
Terrell
Yes.
Bernard.
Terrell Bernard.
Bernard.
Who did I
Bernard.
say?
Christian
Bedford.
Benford.
We all love
Terrell-
Christian Bedford.
yes, okay.
47.
Some
Terrell
popular
Bernard.
names here.
let me look at my board. Yeah, Terrell Bernard. He's in a spot. They draft him. Tremaine Edmonds is in the last year of his contract at a position that has been kind of devalued in the NFL. So if Tremaine Edmonds, as good as he has played and as big a part of this team as he has been since day one, do you go down that road of starting to pay a guy the top of the market money at a position that has been undervalued, or do you draft a guy like Benford the year before that and get him acclimated, and all of a sudden you can let Tremaine Edmonds make a ton of money for somebody else and at a position that you've devalued or don't hold in that high esteem, and then you got this young player. And the interesting part for me is, and the reason I bring it up, is Benford could not be more different than Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds is an enormous physical specimen, a condor-like guy who is he's a smart player, very A equals B, B equals C, therefore
Transitive
A
property.
equals C. Right, he is like, okay, if this is the defense calling, I go here. Benford is like, I'm just going to react. I'm going to have play. He's completely instinctual, and he's a small linebacker.
I was going to say, you look at
Small
this
athlete.
linebacker, you look at where the Bills drafted
And
drafted him, and you go on Twitter, you listen to networks, and they're saying, maybe this guy got drafted a little bit too high, but the scouting department has proved time and time again that they know what they're doing, and you see it show up in training camp practices when Terrell Bernard is breaking up passes, when Terrell Bernard is forcing fumbles and is playing with who you would think would be projected starters.
Right.
How did we get this far without bringing up, DJ, Von, Juan, Don, the sauce? Because, I mean, think about that, right? Like, so now you have, in addition to kind of who's going to play the Will and who's going to be the Mike, and how's that all going to net out with these two different body types? Now you bring in good old Von Miller, who will not stop dancing. And if you don't know that DJ reference, you have to Google it because that's his DJ name.
Yes,
And
yes.
I know that you go to a lot
I was
of
like, "Ugh."
Club Live parties in Miami Super Bowl, but he was DJing down for that. It was
Right.
quite interesting. But it's going to change the shape of the defensive front. And so you already saw a lot of rotations. Now you can add even more folds because, I mean, to see Von Miller in person, I was lucky. I live, in Los Angeles. I saw the Rams up close and personal at the back end of that season. Holy smokes. Like, that is something very different. And this is already the team that had the second highest pressure rate in the NFL last season. Of course, your sack leader now on a different team, but ultimately you bring in Von Miller, and the shape's different. Ed Oliver, good luck stopping him. Good luck. Have fun with that. And that interior situation is just going to be so much better for I don't want to be a guard facing anyone.
Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips.
Jordan
Ed
Phillips
Oliver.
saw career high numbers when he was playing defensive tackle here. He was our leader in sacks one of the seasons that he played here. And one thing that I've loved to watch this defensive line is you have seen the confidence level just shoot through the roof now that Von Miller is on the defensive line with them.
They're having fun.
They're having fun.
Yes.
They're happy. They were dominating in practices. Yes, you could say it was because the offensive line has dealt with some injuries in training camp. They are now healthier. But boy, oh boy, do they look like they're ready to wreck
whose
some
O-line
teams.
isn't healthy, isn't going to be good this year, isn't going to be as good as it was last year? The Rams.
That should be
interesting.
fun
Andrew
to watch.
Whitworth. You
Yeah,
get rid
that's
of
right.
Andrew Whitworth and you don't get better? Oh, okay, got it. Like, I'm telling you, I think that people are low-key not looking at that as that first. I know we're projecting forward now about a month, but that's going to be that is a huge matchup. That should be a postseason game. I mean, goodness, like, that's just going to be so much fun to watch. And I think a very big key to that game is the fact that you got a new left tackle, Matthew Stafford's banged up, and now you got
Von Miller.
Later.
Yeah.
See you
If I
later.
could just go on record that say I think Ed Oliver is going to have a huge
I
year.
do
Yes.
too. I do
think he's gonna have a
too.
huge
He
year.
better.
Write that on the whiteboard.
He better.
Yes, August 12th.
August
August
12th.
12.
Andrew
August
Andrew
12th, when he
Catalon
said it.
predicted.
How
Ed
many
Oliver,
sacks?
big
He would
year.
have 4
We'll see.
last year. So what
He
are
had
we
4
going to
last year.
Where are we going?
Add another
double
4.
it.
8. Okay.
8 sacks
Okay.
for Ed
I
Oliver.
think that you have 2 guys getting multiple in double digits. Because remember, this is a team that's going to be facing a lot of passes late in games, right? I think this is a better team even than last year.
People are going to play catch
They're
up.
going to have to play catch up. And the more passes you face, the more chances you get to rush the passer.
Well, they certainly, and it's interesting, even if the offense does sputter, their defensive line is much bigger and more athletic than it was a year ago. Daquan Jones, Tim Settle, and Jordan Phillips are all bigger and more
Big
effective
guys.
players than the guys they had in there. We all loved.
Do you stand next to them? And
Oh, my
how do you
gosh.
feel when you stand next to them?
listen, Jordan Phillips
Yokes.
is a
He's a big
giant.
man.
No, Jordan Phillips is one of the things.
And I said we had Tim Settle next to us on the show during the week. He was when we were at St. John Fisher, and it felt like you were sitting 3 feet from him, but he's touching you, right? So that's how wide he is, right? It's unbelievable. So they're going to be better against the run. So even if the offense doesn't force them to throw, they're going to force offenses to throw because there's not going to be any more games where teams can throw the ball 3 times and still win the game. So I think they're going to be
But
much
there really
more.
hadn't been many before that either.
Yeah, that's maybe one of a kind. Yeah.
All right, Cynthia, Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to be on with us here on Friday afternoon. You guys can catch them a part of the preseason broadcast tomorrow, Saturday at 4 p.m. as the Bills take on the Indianapolis Colts. Our guy Steve Tasker also going to be a part of that broadcast too.
We could say we.
We
take
us.
on the Colts.
We
us,
are
and
taking
ours.
on the Colts. Preseason game 1 out of 3 coming to you live Saturday afternoon.